Yesterday on the program, for those of you who are able to join us, we talked about the importance of voting in this upcoming election, and not just because of the race for the White House. There are a number of congressional races to keep in mind, as well as many other items that are going to be on ballots, both at state and local levels. Well, if you live in West Virginia, then listen up. This November, voters in the state will find on their ballot West Virginia Amendment number 1. That specific amendment is all about protecting persons against medically assisted suicide. And joining me now to talk about this is the state lawmaker behind that amendment, Delegate Pat McGeehan. Delegate McGeehan, welcome to Washington Watch. Glad to have you.
Hey, good to be with you, Jody. I appreciate it.
Well, it's our honor, and thank you for leading the way here. All right, tell us about this amendment.
So the amendment just places what's already illegal in West Virginia into the state constitution for more security going forward. It's implicitly illegal in West Virginia, but we want to send a message against this sort of nihilistic euthanasia movement sweeping the Western world to other red states like ours, like West Virginia. Like, this is the gold standard. You need to have it in the state constitution because, laws are not simply prescriptive, they're also pedagogical. They teach people. And we need to send a message that, hey, we need to stand firm against this movement that's sweeping the Western world. If you look at the latest stats coming out of Canada's MAID program, which is just a fancy way of saying they're killing their own citizens, in Canada right now, it is the 5th leading cause of death. And it's horrific once you start looking into what's going on in Canada. 10 states have legalized euthanasia in one form or another now. Oregon and Vermont just recently now opened up their euthanasia programs to not just their state residents, but to non-residents. And I guess they just thought it was discrimination on their part just to kill their own citizens. So now you have this sort of euthanasia tourism. So I had a constituent that called me and was struggling, and he recently got diagnosed, or at the time, a year ago, he was diagnosed with a form of colon cancer, but the doctors told him, it could go into remission in a couple of years. But, he was scared. He didn't believe. He was an atheist. And he went to Oregon on Easter Sunday, and I stayed on the phone with him. He flew into Portland, tried to talk him out of it, and he ended his life via medically assisted suicide. And out there in Oregon, you have to wait 2 weeks if you're a non-resident right now. Portland has essentially grown into a whole marketplace for non-residents coming in to kill themselves. And so they have a whole marketplace of hotels and Airbnbs that cater strictly to those that are out of state, traveling into these northwestern states like Oregon. Really, they're death hotels, death Airbnbs. And so wow. You wait 2 weeks, basically, and then you go down to the local doctor. He signs off on it. You get a script. You go to the local pharmacy. You, just like any other medication, they give you a cocktail of poisons. You go back by yourself into one of these hotels devoted towards this sort of law for out-of-state residents. Swallow the cocktail poison. It destroys your organs. Social workers actually come by the next day, collect all the bodies in these hotels, and burn them. And you know what?
Wow.
You got to push back against this. This is just part of a broader trend of nihilism that's sweeping our country with the progressive liberal order. And I'm sick of it.
So this is your driving the stake in the ground, in essence, saying not in West Virginia. We're not going there, and we're going to place it in the state constitution, just as you're watching what's happening, be it in Canada or here in our own country and various other states. So what do you say to those who argue that your state, West Virginia, already has a code that prevents medically assisted suicide or so-called mercy killings, whatever we want to call it?
Well, I mean, most people don't even know that it's illegal or legal. And so that's what I would just tell them. Hey, look, if you want it firmly prohibited, put it in the state constitution, because you never know who's going to be in office next. You know, it might not be guys like me. It might not be guys that are pro-life on the Republican side. And so you do not want arbitrary judgments on good versus bad suicide being decided by government officials. I mean, deciding which suicides are good and which are bad places enormous power in the hands of government officials, and it just leads to arbitrary decisions on where you draw the line. And that just has devastating consequences for individuals in our society. You know, the progressive liberal order likes to reduce morality to just consent, and every relationship somehow has an sort of egalitarian equal notion to it. But doctors have an enormous power of authority in our society. So that doctor-patient power relationship is extremely imbalanced. And so when a doctor suggests to a patient, hey, you can go through with assisted suicide, that's an option, that can heavily influence patients, especially vulnerable patients, that make it very hard to even ensure that the decision is voluntary at all.
Absolutely. You know, we've got less than a minute remaining here, but one of the big issues, I remember when Oregon, some of these other states were going through their battle over this, the argument of so-called death with dignity or some sort of an appeal for compassion was put into the situation as somehow this is an act of dignity. Real quickly, do you have a response to that?
They're twisting the right order definition of compassion. And it preys on a lot of the pro-life movement within our own sort of ranks, because, you know, a lot of people have compassion for the unborn child. And so now they're preying on that compassion that we already hold, and they're trying to twist it and pervert it. You know, I'll just say one thing, and this can be an argument that people need to take into consideration if they're secular or if they're atheists or non-believers. Insurance companies may deny coverage for expensive treatments like cancer care or just to cover assisted suicide, because this is already happening. Hey, you know what? We're not going to cover the chemo you need for the next 2 years, but we will cover the doctor's visit to get your cocktail of poisons.
West Virginia Delegate Pat McGeehan, thank you so much. Thank you for standing in the gap for us. An honor to have you on Washington Watch.